Bruce DuMont back, hour number 2 of Beyond the Beltway. Thanks very much for being with us from coast to coast and border to border. We have to switch gears in this segment of the program. We're going to continue with Dan Johnson, who joins us from the North Shore of Chicago. And also we welcome Julie Bornstein. She is a Democrat residing in Rancho Mirage, California. And Karen Singeman, who is a Republican and certainly a conservative. She joins us from Los Angeles. And I want to begin with Karen. Karen, my question to you is: we've known each other for several years now, and during the primary in 2016, you were one of the most outspoken anti-Trump Republicans who was on my Facebook posts. So my question to you is: you went from someone that absolutely despised Donald Trump to someone that loved Donald Trump. And I wonder, how do you feel about Donald Trump right now? Karen, go ahead. Are you there? Can you turn your microphone on? We're having
clicked on mute. There. All right, there we go. You were so
and
right.
Straighten yourself up. Straighten yourself up in the camera, okay? We're making a lot of mistakes tonight. Go ahead, Karen. You're on the air.
All right. Yes. How did I go from a Trump despising person to I don't think I was ever a Trump loving person, but I certainly felt that against the onslaught of the left that we saw for 8 years of Obama, there was only one person who was going to stand up to everything that they had been doing and were promising to continue to do. And that he was the guy. Did I love him? I'd never loved him. Did I believe that he was the one person to be the bulwark against globalism, against socialism, against all the hate that we had seen from the Obama administration, the violence against us, the nastiness, the rudeness, the viciousness.
So where are you now? Where are you now? That's the history. Where are you? Where are you right now in the wake of what transpired at the Capitol last week?
I am horrified at what happened at the Capitol, but more, and I am, and I was actually in Washington at the rally. I was not at the Capitol, but I was there all morning, and I saw, the same thing I've seen over and over at Trump rallies or Republican rallies or Stop the Steal rallies, which is very concerned people about the freedoms that we're losing, very concerned about the theft of the election, concerned about fraud. And we are the first of first world countries, and for us to not be able to hold an election that people really in good conscience can say, this was actually legitimate. I stand up for anybody who's fighting against the illegitimacy of this election. To me, everything right now is not about President Trump.
Karen, everybody that was at that rally, at least storming the gates of the Capitol and going into the Capitol unlawfully, they all agree with what you just said. They think that the election was stolen, and they're there. So I mean, where do you stop and the rioters take over?
Well, first I would say that most of the people who went in lawfully. If you watch the videos, police beckoned them in, police ushered them in, police let them in, police led them in, police moved the barricades. That's not to say all of them. I understand there was a lot of horrible mayhem. Mm-hmm. But I also know there was a lot of not horrible mayhem. And if you look at the videos, you'll see our people, the Trump rally people. I reject the idea that they were all protesters. I was not a protester. Walking between the velvet ropes as if they are on tour.
Let me stop you for a second, because we have a new Democrat who's joining us, and that's Julie Bornstein. Julie is a former member of the California General Assembly many years ago, and active in Democratic politics in the Palm Springs, Rancho Mirage area. Give us what you saw, because Karen is painting a picture that not many people would agree with, at least those that were watching us on television. So let's go to you, Julie. What's your response?
Thank you, Bruce. One thing, though, I do want to correct before I get to the substance of my remarks is I'm actually from the city of Indian Wells.
Okay, I'm sorry.
For the people who live in California, that's one of the most Republican cities in California.
Okay.
Even today. And you know what? We all get along. And we all get along by not calling each other names or attributing nasty characteristics or personality defects or political heresy to each other. So we're quite civil. We just understand that we have a different philosophy about American democracy. And usually those differences get manifested in policy, but not calling each other names. Now, what did I see? I've been active in a number of nonprofits. I still sit on a couple of nonprofit boards, and that work takes me to Washington every couple of months. I've entered the Capitol many, many times. I've entered the congressional office buildings many, many times. You have to go through metal detectors. You have to empty your pockets. You wait your turn. You don't go into those corners. So being very familiar with that terrain, there is no question in my mind that that crowd overcame the normal protocol for entering the buildings of our Congress. And I saw that over and over. Did I see a scene where officers who were not armed, who had no protective gear on, stood back and let the crowd rush in? Yeah, I saw that. But I looked at that as more being a self-defense mechanism because they were not prepared than to say that they were given permission to enter the Capitol.
Julie, some people, some critics have said they thought that the Capitol Police, again, were not prepared, which is, I think, what you have just said, but also that some of them were letting people in, having selfies taken with them, acting in sort of a celebratory way. Do you question that there may be some in the ranks of the Capitol Police that were supporters of this group?
Well, of course, I only know what I saw on television, and I watched several channels to make sure that I don't get just one point of view. There's certainly enough evidence in my mind to warrant an investigation. I, too, saw the picture of an officer who looks like he has a smile on his face, posing for selfies with some of the insurgents, and I think an investigation is necessary to find out what
there's one report, by the way, that the police officers, Capitol Police, were told to take some selfies because they could use that as evidence in trying to identify people. We don't know whether that's true, but at least that's the other side of that story. I want to go back to Dan Johnson, who I'm going to let he joins us as another Democrat on the program this evening from the first hour. Dan, I want to go back to what you think should happen next. You want the president removed, but what happens if he's not removed? What is the what's the Democratic response if the 25th Amendment is not implemented or even tried, and the House goes ahead with an impeachment that the Senate is not likely to either approve or reject?
I think this week marked the end of tolerance of political violence and the big lie that our sacred democracy was somehow stolen, and that echoing that big lie has led to the unthinkable. And the police officer that I saw was beat to death with an American flag by the mob in order to force their way inside. Let's not pretend this was anything less than a coup.
Okay. We're gonna be back. We're gonna be back. Also, Ken Craig joins us. He continues as well. I'm Bruce DuMont. Don't go away. Don't go away. Our program, and thanks very much for being with us this evening. 1-800-723-8289. Ken Gray, I want to go to you because you have been the most loyal Trump person on this program for many, many years, and I'm wondering what you think goes next. What happens to Donald Trump and the Trump legacy in the wake of what happened last week?
I think the legacy will end up being better than what this week has looked like. And I do think that he will exit the presidency significantly chagrined. This week was not good. I mean, I was a Trump supporter in 2015. I was one of the first 20 senior staff on the campaign. I've done over 50 major presidential events around the country and the world. I never saw anything like Wednesday, except for the rally that we had in Chicago that my name's on the contract with UIC for. Now, the only good news about the Chicago rally / riot was that was 100% Democrats that had infiltrated. But this week was not good. And the idea to have a rally down the street from the Capitol at basically the same day and roughly the same time as the Electoral College meeting was a mistake.
Now let me go back, because you alluded to something, and again we have some real political animals that know the history of a lot of things, but you and I attended that rally in the 2016 election at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago. You were there. The violence that night, and by the way, that's when Donald Trump got the reputation for having events that got out of hand and turned violent. As someone who was there and saw it with my own eyes, the violence at that rally was only anti-Trump people beating up and shouting down and starting fights with pro-Trump people. That's what I saw with my own eyes. I saw it in the auditorium, and I saw it leaving the auditorium. And by the way, I will also say that it was very questionable to have the rally at that public forum, because it's one of the most diverse universities in the United States. And again, by having a rally there pro-Trump with a lot of Hispanics that also attend that school, having that rally there at that time looked a little suspect to me, because it looked like they were asking for trouble. So I'm thinking that maybe we're seeing the reverse end of that. But you and I really saw the beginning of at least violence at Trump rallies, and again, it was all in one direction. It certainly was not the case last week. Now, I
was going to say, Bruce, that was an interesting event. That event was supposed to be at the Rosemont Horizon Allstate Arena or out at the Sears Center out in the western suburbs, and Governor Rauner and his people shut us down at Rosemont, and we had to scramble to find a place to do it, and we ended up at UIC. That's why we were at UIC. That was an intra-Republican war during the primary. Right.
Okay. That's a good explanation, which we've not heard before. My question to you, Karen Sigelman, going back to California. Karen, what is your view of what should happen in the next 10 days? How do you want to see this end?
Absolutely. All of the hate against conservatives and Trump supporters has got to stop. Calling us domestic terrorists, the end. It's stunning to me how every one of us is painted with this brush when our cities were on fire, literally on fire. The vandalism, the murder, the theft, the arson, everything. I lived under curfew night after night after night because of Black Lives Matter, and the capitulation by every major organization was stunning. Washington was on fire. Buildings were occupied.
Julie, my question to you is,
to stop.
Okay,
so
Julie.
We need to.
Julie, let me ask you this question. Julie,
this was a stunning thing. It normalized rioting. It brought into our language mostly peace.
Karen, let me interrupt here and go to Julie, because I want to ask Julie, in the wake of the win by Donald Trump in 2016, would you agree that many Democrats, not all, maybe not even you, that many Democrats decided they were going to set up Trump supporters as pariahs, that literally they hated Donald Trump, and they were going to make sure that anyone who supported Donald Trump was going to be viewed as a pariah or a fascist or a communist?
No, I would definitely not agree.
Okay.
And I happen to be in the house now because of the pandemic, but I get out a lot, and I get out a lot around the country, and that's absolutely not anything I would agree with.
It's absolutely true.
Have to laugh because it demonstrates that she's the one that's talking negatively about us, not what you're just implying that we're talking negatively about them. Now, what I found in my travels around, and I have lots of family in Los Angeles, lived there a long time, so I was there quite a bit, was that we were disappointed because, of course, our candidate won the popular vote, but lost by under 100,000 dispersed among the Electoral College delegations. But that is our system. We gained the popular vote and lost the presidency in the Electoral College in 2000. So we're used to this. But we did not, and certainly the people I know, both Republicans and Democrats, take this into our homes and our social lives. It's only, well, I'm sorry who Karen hangs out with, but that is not my experience. And you asked me my experience, my opinion. So if she doesn't like it, she doesn't like it. But and so the facial expressions, the body language we're all seeing says more about her than me. But what we did find is we didn't like the policies that started coming out immediately. Within the first week of taking office, we saw Trump have a private meeting with the Russian foreign minister, where no Americans were there. And then we had an immediate firing of Michael Flynn because he lied to the vice president about what he told the Russians. We saw the Muslim ban. And of course, California is a very diverse state. To us, our diversity is one of our real strengths. And we in the Democratic Party pride ourselves on our diversity.
But again, Julie,
people nervous.
In an election, there is a winner and there's a loser, and the winner gets a chance to do the policies that they were elected. Just as I would say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, they now get a chance to do what they want to do because they won an election, and now I'm going to ask Karen.
Well,
Karen, would you agree with that?
Let me just respond to that one item because you left it hanging out there. Okay. I don't remember, and I follow elections very closely. I don't remember Donald Trump ever campaigning on a pro-Russian platform.
Karen, I want to go to you. 4 years ago, Donald Trump won, and you were very upset because many people who were Democrats would not accept Donald Trump as the legitimate president. They hated him. They thought the Russians were involved. Now, it's 4 years later. Now the shoe is on the other foot. There was an election. Joe Biden won the election, and then he was able to come up with two surprise victories in Georgia. So there's a Democratic swing in the country, and yet you think it was illegitimate. But how is this different than 4 years ago?
Well, exactly.
I mean, are you willing to accept the election and not turn every, discussion or every household or bring up differences within households and people, throwing people off Facebook? I mean, do you understand the apparent similarity in what's going on here?
Oh, absolutely. And it's lovely. I applaud Julie for her experience, but all my Republican conservative friends have been through hell these last 4 years. And I promise you, it's not us. People say, you like Trump, I'm cutting you off. I know parents whose children won't talk to them anymore. So there's divisiveness. There's unbelievable divisiveness, and we are suffering. Is it the same? No, it's absolutely not the same. And we talked about this before, Bruce, right after the election, the issue of legitimacy versus illegitimacy. And all I've been wanting is for the lawsuits to be heard, for forensic audits to happen, for examinations of things in the 6 questionable states, so that we can be assured of a free and fair election, and not only for this time, but forevermore. We are the first of first world countries, and for
I'll tell you, Bruce,
many of us to really in our heart believe, and we have not been heard. The examinations have not occurred. If you recount votes that you believe to be fraudulent, it doesn't. You're just still recounting.
Well, no, but there have been. Judges have ruled on what's been brought before them.
No, they haven't. In fact, they've never ruled on the content of the suit. They've rejected the suit. They've never examined the data.
Let's go back. I want to go to Dan Johnson. He's been chomping at the bit to get in here. Dan, go ahead.
Bruce, tolerance of the big lie that Karen is continuing to spout. Tolerance of the lies leads to unthinkable acts.
Which unthinkable acts are those? Are cities burning? That were all white supremacists? That were Nazis? That were anti-Semites? Those lies?
The reason why the armed thug mob attacked The precious heart of our democracy is because we've tolerated the complicity of people that continue to spout the big lie.
You know, which one from the right was armed? Who was armed and who shot whom?
Refuses to do so.
Who was armed? You accused us of being an armed mob. Who was armed? Who was armed, Dan?
I have not seen any evidence that there were armed
That's the big
people.
lie.
They were armed
Calling
with
us an
spears.
armed
They were
mob
not
is a
armed
lie.
with guns. We've got to pause, folks. We got to go back, folks. Hold it. We got to, ladies and gentlemen, we got to go back to our corners. We'll continue with more in a moment. Bruce DuMont back. Thanks very much for joining us. And let us go to California right now. And let's let Karen Singerman tell everybody who you are. Karen, what are you up to?
I'm Karen Sigmund. I live in Calabasas. I've mostly lived on the West Coast. I am chairman of the 45th Assembly District Republican Party Central Committee. So I am an officer of the Republican Party. And I head up a nonprofit organization called the American Freedom Alliance, where we fight and defend values of Western civilization, including restoring education to be education rather than indoctrination. And we're going to pivot towards ensuring that the media is no longer a propaganda arm of the Democrat Party. So we defend values of Western civilization, and boy, it's under attack day after day after day. And
let's go to Julie Bornstein, and let's get your political resume, Julie.
Okay, Bruce. I am a California native, having lived my whole life in California. As you mentioned, I served in the California Assembly, where I was part of the leadership as chair of the Democratic Caucus. By trade, I am an attorney and a teacher. I've taught American government at the college level and constitutional law in law school. And I just recently retired from running a nonprofit that develops affordable housing. And so my real policy area of expertise is affordable housing.
Okay. Let me ask our California guests, how real is the recall effort for your governor? Julie, I'm going to let you respond first.
All right. Well, I think we have to take it as something that's realistic. I was an appointee in the Gray Davis administration, and he was recalled. That was a recall effort bankrolled by Darrell Issa, but once Arnold Schwarzenegger got involved, Schwarzenegger ended up winning the recall. But this recall is certainly an expression of people's frustration with the COVID-19 pandemic and some of the restrictions that come from that. And someone, through a 501c4, made a $500,000 contribution. We do not know who that entity is, but they are bankrolling the professional signature gatherers to put a recall on the ballot. So I think with that kind of dark money behind it, and the current frustrations, that we have to take it seriously.
And Karen, how seriously do you take it?
I don't know. I think it is serious, and it did certainly predate the pandemic. So it's not about the pandemic response, although it did get a resurgence of interest. If there's money thrown at it, that's awesome. Look at all the money thrown at the Senate races in Georgia. So if we're going to talk about dark money, let's not ignore that. I don't know how well it's going to go, and I don't know. That's part one. Part two is with whom do we replace him? That hasn't become obvious. There is a ton of anger here in California. Yes, pandemic related, but it predated pandemic. Everything that Governor Newsom has done to harm this once great and golden state.
Okay.
I think that there's a tremendous energy there.
Let me go back to Dan Johnson. Dan, you wanted to pop in with a question for Kent Gray.
Look, Kent, I appreciate your candor about what an atrocious week this was. I can acknowledge the president has never, ever been so explicit in calling for violence as he was at that particular rally.
Could I just interrupt for a second? What were his words that called for violence?
Let's let him make his
right.
point, and then we'll go to you, Karen.
I'm really tired of that lie.
I'm delighted to be on a talk show that you have put together with people from all persuasions. It's what our country needs more of. I have to be honest with you, Bruce. I've never felt so much anger at this conversation with a woman who can pretend that the coup didn't occur, pretend a violent mob wasn't violent. And I'll tell you, Bruce, I just have to say this. It frightens me because I watched Arnold Schwarzenegger's speech today when he said what it was like when the good Germans went with the big lie step by
I'm
step.
sorry, Bruce, that's the end. I'm sorry. I'm done. I will not be party to that kind of accusation.
All right, Karen.
Absolutely
Karen,
not.
we're going to go to Karen.
I'm not. Nope, I'm
Karen,
sorry.
Go to
That's
you.
so. That is the ultimate
The chair
big
recognizes
lie.
Karen. Karen, go ahead.
I am flabbergasted that anybody can say such a thing. My father was German. My mother was Jewish. This entire 4 years, we have been denounced as if we are the Jews. It's been an astounding. The coup was not us. I never said there was no violence at the Capitol. There was absolutely violence, and I said there shouldn't be. You're the one who started with the attacks about the big lie. I am refuting the big lie. You said we were an armed mob. We were not an armed mob. You're the one now calling us Nazi. It's an astounding, absolutely not. You just said the president called for violence. I asked you for proof. And you know why I'm angry? Because I, this week, have been called a domestic terrorist because friends of mine have been thrown off airplanes for praising Trump, because the president has been deplatformed, because another alternative to Facebook, which is unbelievable propagandistic, has been thrown off platforms. The hate.
Karen,
I am responding to this hate, to our being demonized. Okay. This was a Reichstag fire.
Karen,
responsibility.
Karen, back to Dan.
Yes, Bruce.
I'm trying to be a referee here, but again, if people are talking over, nobody hears anything. I want to be fair and as balanced as I can. Back to you, Dan, and then we're going to bring our other guests involved.
Thank you. I just want to hear your thoughts, Kent, on putting aside the policy triumphs, all the judges, all the standard stuff that Trump was successful on. Things have turned dramatically this week. And as somebody that, should get your political credit for helping to get one of your own and your policy victories, I don't mean this pejoratively, right? But now that things have changed, I just want to ask, as somebody who's a believer, do you think it's time for the movement that you believe in, the policy issues that you believe in? Do you think it's time to excise the domestic terrorists which are in our country, which do plan to kidnap governors? How do we get the people like you that are believers in the policies to shun the terrorists and the militias that threaten our republic? I'm asking you how we do that, Kent.
Kent.
And I want to be clear. I don't support these QAnon folks running around and, jackbooted in the Capitol or in the capital of Michigan, trying to do something to the governor there. I don't back that at all. But the point is, that President Trump got another almost 10 million votes from 4 years ago. And there is a real belief in what he is talking about to the common American. Now, Joe Biden got a lot of votes too. And part of what my consideration is going forward is that, yes, the Electoral College is what governs. And it appears to me that Joe Biden did a few shenanigans in the Electoral College. We'll get past this big lie thing. I'm not going to fight that fight tonight. But the point is, he did get a whole lot of votes. And so at the end of the day, if you're going to throw it down and say it's unclear which states should have gone the Electoral College because Wisconsin was 12,000 votes difference and we think there were shenanigans. Well, guess what? Joe Biden got a whole lot more votes than Donald Trump does. And I can live with that because at the end of the day, in 1960, the Republicans thought the Democrats stole the election. In 2000, the Democrats thought that Republicans stole the election. 4 years ago, you guys thought we stole the election with the help of the Russians, which was BS. And this year, we're going to think for a while that you guys probably were involved in stealing the election. So, I mean, from that standpoint, these are not unusual situations. I worked in the Bush administration. The Democrats were very unhappy with us after Bush v. Gore for a solid 2 years. 9/11 kind of moved that messaging on. The Democrats have a lot of trouble this year.
Help me.
Because they got a tight majority in the House.
Ken,
They barely have a majority in the Senate. We've got to come together and try to move some stuff forward in this country. And everybody could do with a little bit of time of cooling off. I think President Trump should serve out the last of his 9.5 days that remain and leave gracefully. I would have preferred that he would have gone to the Capitol, but you and I both know he probably would have made facial expressions that would have embarrassed him and probably the rest of us. So this is probably best that we just move on from this point. I don't think he's going to nuke anybody. I think that's ridiculous. And we just need to get to a point where we can make some substantive advancements for our country going forward. And then, to be honest, I think the Democrats are probably going to overplay their hand in the next couple of weeks or few months. And then we'll talk about that in a future.
I want to go to Julie. I want to get Julie's response to what you think will happen in the remaining 10 days in the administration. What do you hope happens? Are you hoping for the 25th Amendment? Are you hoping for impeachment? If there's an impeachment, is there going to be a trial? Why spend all that time and effort if it's a matter of days that he's going to be leaving anyway?
Well, and that certainly sounds like a logical way to view it. The problem is, and for any of us who are parents, we know that when your child misbehaves, there has to be consequences. Otherwise, they believe they're rewarded for the misbehavior. That rule applies in government as well. If someone breaks our democratic norms and it treats themselves as being above the law, and I'm not going to incite Karen any longer here by giving more examples. I think we all know what we mean. There has to be consequences. I was a fan of Senator Collins until she said after the impeachment that she felt Mr. Trump had learned a lesson. He clearly didn't. And I believe there have to be consequences. Now, having lived through the Watergate scandal and the resignation of Richard Nixon,
10 seconds.
I would prefer that the leadership of the Republican Party, working together with the leadership of the Democratic Party, persuade Mr. Trump that he should resign. So in that way, we know he does not have the power.
We've got to pause. We're running into a commercial break. Back shortly with one more segment. Bruce DuMont back. We continue with our last segment. Other than that, we're going to be out of here in 15 minutes. Connor McKnight is behind the board, and he has promised that he's going to take this ship into a successful landing in about 14 minutes. I want to go back to the suggestion that Julie made, is that somebody could step forward and convince the president that the best thing to do would be to resign. If someone were to do that, Karen, would that person be signing their political death warrant if they tried to be the peacemaker here and talk the president out of the office?
Absolutely. Based on what? I mean, literally based on what? The rhetoric that we've been seeing that Dan cited, that he called for violence, is in direct opposition to the facts. He was very clear over and over and over and over and over, peaceful. Were there people not peaceful? Obviously. But he has never, not one time, called for violence. He has never called for divisiveness. And again, what we lived through all summer.
Wait a minute, Karen. I've got to tell you. I don't know whether you heard the first segment, but when I heard his speech and Rudy Giuliani and Don Jr.'s, but when I heard his speech, when I was listening to him, and again, I've been forgiving of Donald Trump for 4 years, and a lot of listeners to this program think I've been too forgiving. But when I was listening to it, you know what my thought was? This guy is inciting a riot. Why isn't somebody from the District of Columbia show up there and arrest him? Now, that's my opinion, and I've always given him the benefit of doubt. So to say that he didn't say things, that were encouraging this unruly crowd, and it was an unruly crowd that he was giving his speech to. It got more unruly later on. He clearly was telling them to go down to Capitol. You can't win if you're not strong. And the purpose to go down to the Capitol was a very important constitutional vote was being held, and he wanted to disrupt that vote. I don't think there's I don't know how you can listen to that speech and not come and think that he was Mr. Rogers having a talk with his kids.
And Bruce, the Supreme Court set the standard for incitement in the Brandenburg case, where the fighting words that were used at the Trump rally were so toned down, they were 4 or 5 levels down, and that was incitement. And then, of course, you put words in a context. It would be a matter for a jury, but look at the context. While the violence was going on in the Capitol, Mr. Trump was trying to reach Tommy Tuberville to tell him to delay the vote even longer. And so all of that would be admissible in determining whether this conduct rises to the legal standard of incitement. And, based on the law and the historical opinions of the Supreme Court, I think it does.
Bruce, I think it's important to remember the president said to march to the Capitol peacefully and patriotically. That's the quote.
Correct.
That's from his speech that day. And if you read that article from Jonathan Turley yesterday that talks about the level of incitement, Jonathan Turley, who is a Democrat, a constitutional scholar, says there ain't nothing there that approaches what the legal standard is for incitement.
And also Alan Dershowitz. Go ahead, Julie.
So Jonathan Turley has been the Republicans' go-to constitutional lawyer. He's not representing.
He's a Democrat.
I think it's really important to remember, too, though, that those of us who went there, obviously not all, but by far the majority, what we wanted to see was that the constitutionally laid out process of the various states which we have issues with, the legitimacy, we wanted that duked out. And by duked out, I don't mean violence. I mean, Arizona was in dispute. You take your 2 hours and you resolve it. 99% of us there wanted that process to be gone through in every possible legitimate way. Because don't forget, the whole argument of most of us there was the legitimacy of the election. And if every state were examined, if all the requests for machines, for paper ballots, for audits had been responded to with
Karen,
with grace.
Let me ask Karen. I want to ask a follow up. Just a second, Karen.
Bruce,
I want to ask a follow up political question to you.
Mm-hmm.
You may or may not agree with what I'm about to just say, but one of the reasons why Donald Trump lost the election, and one of the reasons why they did not do well in Georgia, is a growing number of women, suburban Republican women, who were offended by Donald Trump's actions and his rhetoric that caused them to vote for Joe Biden. And I'm wondering, in the wake of what happened last week in the Capitol, what makes you or anyone think that suburban Republican women are going to be more forgiving of Donald Trump or the Republican Party because of what happened last week? Because I will tell you, a large number of those women who may never be gettable again for a Republican, and it's going to be, and it's because of the rhetoric of Donald Trump, and it's because of the actions of some people who showed up there, and they were thugs.
Absolutely.
You may call them patriots. I call them. I agree with Joe Biden. They are thugs. So I'm wondering, from a political standpoint, long term, I wonder if they're thinking that there's going to be a comeuppance in 2022 with Republican women coming back to support the Republican Party. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that bird is out of the cage. On that note, I have to say farewell to you, Karen Sigeman. Thank you very much, joining us from Los Angeles. Julie Bornstein, thank you very much for joining us for Indian Wells in California. And again, Kent Gray and Dan Johnson here in Illinois. I'm Bruce DuMont. Thanks to Connor McKnight for his assistance in the production of this program. Until next week, it'll be the last broadcast of the Trump administration. Next Sunday night, be here or be square. I'm Bruce DuMont. So long.